You're listening to the Rosenfeld Review. I'm Lou Rosenfeld. I am joined today by the opening speaker at Advancing Research 2024, which is taking place in New York City, March 25th, March 26th. That's coming up, Neil. Neil Barrie. Hi, Neil. Welcome.
Hello, Lou. Very honored to be on this podcast.
Well, thank you. And we're honored to have you. Neil, if you're a researcher, that's who the conference is really designed for, UX researcher, user researchers, and so forth. And so Neil is kind of an outsider, in his own words, to that world. And that's why we're so excited to have him. He is the co-founder and CEO of 21stCenturyBrand. And what he's talking about at the conference, we're going to get a taste of today. We're going to dig into it a bit. And Neil, would it be fair to say that you are trying to get people like researchers to take a different lens on how product experiences can be created, researched, designed, and that lens is one of culture? Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, that's right, Lou. I think, I am bringing an outside perspective on this, and I think a lot of my work, our company, we work with a lot of leadership teams. We get involved in product quality. It's really about creating influential brands. Like our whole mission's around building the most influential brands of our time. 21stCenturyBrand, we formed out of the Airbnb team. And so we work with the likes of Bumble and Headspace and Monzo and Chime and a lot of really interesting companies that are using their products quite often to reshape markets, reshape categories for the better. And so I cross paths a lot with product researchers, user researchers, and it's just struck me over the 5 years of leading the company that we're all trying to make our products as useful and beloved as possible, our services, our brands. But it can get quite incremental. You can get a lot of smart people, a lot of people switching between different roles and different companies, and to really be different and also sort of memorable and provide a great experience, things can get quite similar. You can get a sort of wind tunnel effect, and this can be quite interchangeable quite often when people aren't paying attention. And so I think that the wider cultural factors can really lead to breakthroughs. It's the same in brand building, and because that's ultimately the lens through which a lot of people are experiencing brands and product. And so if we dedicate more attention to that, the sort of cultural factors, the cultural experiences that people are having, that dialogue, I think can lead to really great breakthroughs. And
can I just ask, I love that term, wind tunnel effect, and I'm curious to know if that, is that wind tunnel, do you mean in terms of like how discovery research is done, or do you mean in terms of the broader experience? Talk a little bit more about the wind tunnel effect.
I think for me, it's, originally it was a certain period, I think probably in the 90s, where cars all started looking quite similar because they were all going through the same sort of filter. And I'm not a car guy, so there's probably some piston heads on your podcast going, what is he talking about? But I think you know what I mean. Things ended up being quite much more efficient and better to use and all of that, but also less distinctive and memorable. And I think there's a danger. We have to watch that, particularly in tech, but just in general service experiences. The more people that we can get to things that are quite simple, there's very, very incremental differences between different companies. And so I think if we're looking for breakthroughs in the way in which we understand users and understand how to create great experiences, I think more attention to cultural factors can lead to big breakthroughs.
So let's talk a little bit about those cultural factors. Is there almost like a framework that you use to tease apart culture into its components? How do you start, and how does it work as a lens on research?
Yes, so I think culture is a word which is used in lots of different ways. But for us, we think about it as the shared experiences and passions that people are having. And it's both the interest and then the experiences in the communities that grow up around those cultures, which quite often shape their world. So whether it's the news that they're experiencing or getting angry or passionate about, or the music or the arts, or different areas, but it's ultimately about how they are consuming things but voluntarily with others and having shared experiences. So that area of their lives, and which boils down to different passion points. How is that paying more attention to those experiences on top of the experiences they're having with our brands and products is a really important.
So let's take that example of cars, or maybe we could use one of the ones that you've worked with, I know you've worked with Airbnb and Netflix and Pinterest and Disney and amazing brands there. But so not just looking at let's say the car as a product, but you're saying look at it as a part of a culture or subculture maybe that people participate in. Can we dig into that a little more with an example?
Yeah, Pinterest is a good example, I think, because I think they're a good example of a company that have made pretty decisive moves with and innovations based on quite an expanded view of user experience and culture. So which I don't think they would have got to without that. So even if you take removing the like button, that was a massive move in 2017 when they did that. And I think what there is at that company that I admire is a real commitment to addressing some of the wider issues that digital platforms can create for people in terms of mental well-being and so on. And so, whilst like button's clearly great for engagement, the fact that it wasn't, that there was so much anxiety around social media in particular, and the sort of idea of quantifying yourself and quantifying your friendships and quantifying your ideas, what people think of your ideas. Those are culturally that's a very new concept. And just the idea of even counting your friends and being able to do that technically every day, or counting the reactions. And so getting rid of that like button showed a cultural understanding, which I don't think would have happened without that proper understanding of how culture is impacting on people's lives and well-being. I think the same sort of understanding there has led to other breakthroughs, which I've seen working with them, like beauty search, like the way that introducing skin tone filters for beauty search, so rather if people different ethnicities, rather than having to articulate exactly what their skin tone is in writing, they can just select it. And that again, I think comes from teams in that case within Pinterest who have a specific understanding of different cultures and ethnic groups and the challenges that they're facing both in the world in terms of feeling disenfranchised and sort of not being catered for properly. And so that sort of cultural understanding leads to things which I think arguably you wouldn't pick up so readily or prioritize so readily if you were just looking at the sort of signals you're getting from the wide swathe of users. So it helps you prioritize things which you might not otherwise do, and both of those initiatives being disproportionately powerful for that brand in terms of creating a more positive experience, creating more of a positive conversation around the brand, and sort of showing it to be something which is really committed to its user base.
It's interesting in the case of Pinterest, like a platform that large and broad. The cultural lens is obviously very important in the ways you just described. But I wonder, in your experience of working with like such a large platform, that there are challenges around subcultures coexisting on the same platform with the same functionality. So, for example, I can see why they removed the like button, but did that create problems in let's say, the subculture of people who were sharing information about, I don't know, mid-century modern furniture, where the like button didn't create that anxiety or those kinds of same problems? So where you are addressing, maybe one subculture's needs, but maybe taking away some value for another subculture. Is that something you've seen on broad platforms like Pinterest?
Yeah, I think it's right. I think that's where having a really clear sense of sort of mission is really important. You know, they're very committed to the inclusive inspiration, like the world's inspiration company. There's a sort of mission there that we worked on with them, with the founders and the CMO and so on. And I think if you're really clear on what you're for and what you're about, then it makes it easier to make those kind of trade-offs. And I think there was definitely some commercial hit in the short term in terms of engagement, but longer term, it's made the experience more distinctive, more valuable, and has paid off. But yeah, definitely, there's sacrifices when you make those things. So you've got to really know. I guess you've got to, when you are doing this, you've got to be quantifying what are the right cultural areas for my brand to be focusing in, and what's the value of doing that. Because yeah, you could easily, you can't do it lightly. You've got to be really strategic, and it's got to be. So a lot of brands play with culture, and then get burned. You know, there's no question.
Well, and as you're alluding, you have to have some data, you have to have evidence, and that calls into not question, but that means there are people who have to work on that and develop the evidence that justifies making, in this case, such a massive and risky decision. To their credit, they did it and it worked. We're going to take a quick break. After the break, I'd love to talk about connecting those dots from where researchers fit, what their role is, and how their work can better support those kinds of strategic decisions. We'll cover that right after the break. You're listening to the Rosenfeld Review. Hey, it's Lou, and you know that I like to tell you about upcoming conferences. We do 4 of them a year. This one's extra special. Advancing Research 2024 is going to be the first in-person conference we've done since 2019. Thank goodness. I can't wait to see people in person. It's going to take place in New York City at the Museum of the Moving Image, a great venue. We've used it before. March 25th and 26th with workshops on March 27th. Advancing Research, this is the 5th edition. We really speak to people who are at least midway through their careers and are looking to get way past the 101 stuff. You'll love to know that the featured speakers are Tricia Wong, Victor Udoewa, Steve Portugal, and Neil Barrie. Got some other great people in the program, like Nalini Katamraju, Nick Fine, Robin Beers, a bunch of other great folks, and a great lineup of workshops. So if you are a researcher of any kind and you want to be with other researchers in a really great intimate venue with really high quality content, join us at Advancing Research 2024. Check it out at advancingresearchconference.com. Welcome back to the Rosenfeld Review. I'm with Neil Barrie, co-founder and global CEO of 21st Century Brand. He's speaking to me today from London. We're talking about ideas of how we can look at culture, a broader cultural framing as a lens on, well, a lot of things, but we really want to dig in a little bit more into how it can be useful for researchers so that they can help organizations get to broader breakthroughs, to ahas. But, you know, like a lot of things, Neil, I think we're kind of working at an intersection. We're kind of plumbing the intersection maybe of maybe cultural analysis and brand building, which I'm guessing are really, you know, very much your bailiwick, with traditional UX research. And those are, to me, the intersections are a little scary because they're often new and unexplored, but that's what makes them interesting. And so let's go a little deeper into that intersection and think about the connections between those two areas. So maybe we could start for a moment by digging into a little bit of an overview of the tools that a brand strategy expert or researcher would be using to learn And then we could compare that a little bit with maybe a more traditional UX researcher's toolkit.
Yeah. So I think brand strategy tends to be about questions. Asking great questions is always the key to it. So I think when we're one of the big things of, okay, all right, you're saying we need to have much more of a sort of cultural lens on research, on the research process for my company, for my brand, for my product. The first question is like, well, all right, what areas of culture should we be looking at? What are relevant? What areas are likely to be influencing my audiences at scale? So that's question number one.
Mm-hmm.
And then within that, you're then trying to identify what are the right subcultures and communities within that, and how are they behaving, and what are the key sort of tensions within those groups, and sort of behaviors and rituals and all of those pieces. And then you're trying to narrow down into which are the most interesting, which are the most impactful for our area. So if you're in dating versus if you're in your potato chips, it's the same sort of set of questions you're trying to answer. You're going to get quite different areas out of it. And I think in terms of the right tools to do that, I think there's some really good quantitative proper data tracking tools, like Culture Lab. Part of Common Interest is our investors is a really good nascent one that's starting to be prototyped and used really well. There's people like Simpler who can do it. So just helping people understand in the toolkit that you have, helping understand culture at scale in a way that you can sort of feed it audience signals from your own priority segments.
Just to make sure I'm clear, so that kind of data is emerging from, is it from like things like social media? Is it like sentiment analysis? Are there other sources? And is it primarily quantitative?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's your ideal. So obviously, certainly social media, if you're using tools, your NetBases and so on, or ideally tools that are incorporating a number of inputs more broadly around communities, that the Reddits, also just where people are spending their time, what branded content are they looking at, what communications are they looking at, what ads are they looking at. So picking up lots of signals at scale in a way that can be sort of mined and filtered through the lens of different passion points. So that's where I think you're going to get a good quantitative read on, like, where should I be looking? There's obviously more manual ways of doing that as well.
Well, do you actually, one of the threads in what I've heard you say today is that it's good to have different perspectives looking at the same challenge, the same projects and so forth. So what kind of other perspectives or tools are you looping into what sounds like sort of like the foundation of quantitative analysis that you've already described?
Yeah, and then I don't know if I call them tools, but it's experts, lateral experts, journalists, the people who have the sort of breadth of experience that can get you to those sort of insights and hypotheses to go and explore and improve out quantitatively. So we will always involve quite lateral perspectives. If we're working with a Peloton, for example, we might talk to a priest, because Peloton has a cult like policy, like almost like a religious type policy.
Well, and so that.
when you're thinking about, okay, well, how can we do more of that and channel that sort of fervor and passion, then talking to a priest, someone who really understands religion and how to rally a congregation, incredibly helpful. That helped us get to some really interesting ideas for their community when we were working with them. So it can, I think it's a mixture of quant scale AI driven sort of analysis and tracking, whilst also then taking some leaps and getting some really deep human insight at the same time.
So that latter leap into maybe more qualitative research, it sounds like ethnographic methods might be probably a big part of that.
Yeah. So definitely as well. So anything where you're getting that sort of authentic view of people in their own environment, feeling comfortable doing it. But then also, actually nothing to do with the user, just getting a perspective on a particular area. Like you say, like, you know, if religion is an area of culture that we're interested in, just go to not worry too much about the user side, even at that point, because you're just trying to put together interesting hypotheses to test.
Are there varieties of perspectives or tools or techniques that are less valuable? Like, I mean, I don't know how much you do in terms of evaluative research. Like, we've created we have a brand. Let's see how it's doing, or we have a product and let's see how it's performing.
Yeah. Well, one area, just in terms of evaluating, thinking about the culture side first, we have this thing called dialogue mapping, which is a really simple thing. We use it more in relation to communications, but including product communications. So we do a lot of work in fintech, for example. Fintech, you're always looking at big themes like progress and control and visibility. You know what I mean? The classic things that a lot of fintechs are trying to provide for people. So a really useful exercise we find is to map the dialogue between what people are really saying about these things, whether that's in qual or which we did in this case, community qual research, and then what are actual brands talking about it. So when brands talk about control, and how they're communicating it on their products, how they're communicating it in their ads, versus how do people talk about control. And you get some really interesting, in that particular project, the brand side is very like, control is quite a binary thing. You have it, you don't, you get it. And it's quite a sort of quantifiable, understandable thing. Whereas for people, it's very emotional and it's very tied into their own sense of self-worth. And that isn't really reflected at all. And so you get to quite a nuanced view from looking at the sort of the two different cultures of how people are really talking about controlling their lives and in different sort of how things are portrayed versus how brands talk about it. And dialogue mapping, getting to those disconnects gets you to quite interesting things and ideas for how you can have a more differentiated, valuable perspective on that theme. And I think most categories have the similar themes. If you're in fitness, you're going to get into a bunch of different things like motivation or things like that.
Well, you've used some really powerful words to sort of, frame these areas like fitness, for example. I have one more question for you. And could you, in a word or two, sort of similarly frame what you look for or what you will be looking for in the kind of people that you have doing this exploration?
There's two really important qualities, which are slightly opposing in a way. One is about being really a sort of acute and clear about what you're really trying to solve for, and what you're really trying to ask. Mm-hmm. What's really the behavior changes, what's really the sort of, able to think in things like get to buy and think just quite, tool-based thinking or framework-based thinking, but at the same time being very also empathetic, open and curious. I think that's what makes the best types of sort of strategic researchers and strategists as well. Just that two combination of very clear, incisive thinking to set the right canvas for investigation, but then very open and empathetic in a way about exploring it. That makes sense. I'm always looking for those two things. It's quite a rare combination, actually.
Yeah,
it's great combination. But I don't think it's fair to think about. I think you can have quite a lot of people have that combination.
So you have to build teams, and build them very consciously and with the differences built in.
Yes. Yeah. Totally. And harness that, the diversity and harmony, diversity of thinking, get people that build that trust and dialogue together. Totally.
I love it. Diversity and harmony. And those are two words I will take away for sure. They are, they don't always sort of fit together, but when they do, it's quite powerful. And it sounds like at 21st Century Brand. You're doing some really powerful work. We're really looking forward to learning more about what's going on there and the whole idea of culture as a lens at your talk at Advancing Research in New York City, March 25th and 26th. Neil Barrie, thanks so much for joining us. Before we wrap up, I always like to know if our guests have brought a gift or two for our listeners. What you got for us?
Yeah, my gift on the topic of diversity and harmony actually is a really valuable book called A Colourful View from the Top, which is it's a book with a mission. It's a wisdom companion, and it's designed to inspire the next generation of school leaders to achieve excellence in business. There's 21 stories of excellence of basically luminaries of color who've made it to the top in different fields: architecture, marketing, design, fashion. And it's 21 very candid sort of interviews with their sort of very non-linear roller coaster journey, the challenges they encountered, the allies that they work with, the tools that they use to get through and break through an imperfect system and get to the top. And it's great for school leaders, but for everyone in this audience who are probably more like leaders and managers and companies, it's also brilliant for leaders to help make their own companies, their own departments, their own teams more welcoming, more likely to attract and empower diverse talent to thrive. So it's a really good, honest, candid book. And I'm slightly biased because I helped put it out, but I'm not making money from it. It's not a great
book. I was going to say that before you mentioned your involvement, but I guess truth in advertising, appreciate it. But it does sound like a wonderful read.
Yeah, and if you don't want to read that, my second gift is a book called The Deluge, which is a brilliant book by Stephen Markley. It's a fiction book, and it's this incredible story. Almost science fiction of a sort of eco-activist collective trying to save the planet from all this crazy stuff we're doing, and it's just an amazing the way it's written, the science inside it, the research in it, the media articles in it. It's absolutely brilliant. So The Deluge by Stephen Markley is my other gift.
It sounds like it would be a good companion to Ministry for the Future. Another good read. Neil, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you. Neil Barrie, co-founder and global CEO of 21st Century Brand. We'll look forward to seeing you on March 25th in New York City.
All right.
At Advancing Research. Thanks, Neil, for joining us.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks for listening to the Rosenfeld Review, brought to you by Rosenfeld Media. If you like our show, please subscribe and review it on iTunes, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast platform. I'd love it if you tell a friend to have a listen, and check out our website for over 100 podcasts with other interesting people. You'll find them all at rosenfeldreview.com.